Good morning to all of those joining us from the Western Hemisphere. Good evening to all of us joining us from India and on this side. And a namaste to today's event on women in renewable energy. Today's session is hosted by the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, Government of India, in partnership with the International Solar Alliance. The MNRE has always recognized and consistently encouraged and celebrates the participation of women in India's ambitious and progressive renewable energy program. This synergistic participation is a crucial aspect of increasing in women's representation in India's overall economic growth story. But while some progress has happened, much more needs to be done at every level of the value chain. Women need far more support, whether via policy frameworks or through on-ground systems, to move beyond deep-rooted social and cultural discriminations, limited access to education and training, difficulties in accessing large funds, a lack of entrepreneurial opportunities, and maintaining a balance between family and professional responsibilities. We believe that much more organized and sustained programs are needed, with a focus on women working as leaders in the clean energy sector, especially in the last mile energy enterprises. We are happy for the strong support that ongoing efforts have received from the United Nations, the International Solar Alliance, industry, and civil society. And we hope that today's discussions will drive a consequential dialogue to bring more women to the forefront of India's sustainable energy journey. We will start today's proceedings with the inaugural session and follow that up with two panel discussions. The first panel, Women in Leadership in Renewables, Envisioning a New World, will highlight the importance of including women at each step of the renewables-based energy transition, and will explore the challenges to making this environment conducive and to accelerating this process and making it more inclusive. The second panel, Women Entrepreneurs in RE, a gateway to innovation and economic growth, will showcase some inspiring real-life examples of women entrepreneurs from the clean energy sector and the avenues that their stories can and will open up for those coming into this sector. May I now call on Secretary MNRE, Shri Indu Shekhar Chaturvedi, to start the inaugural panel and set the context with his remarks. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Dr. Ajay Mathur, Director General, International Solar Alliance, Ms. Susan Ferguson, UN Women Representative for India, distinguished participants. Let me begin by welcoming all of you on behalf of the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy to this webinar on women in RE and sustainability. I also thank the International Solar Alliance for collaborating with us for this event. Actually, this webinar has taken a long time in materializing. It is an idea which was initially mooted in May 2020, at a time when the first COVID lockdown was in effect. However, while we did hold our flagship event, RE Invest, in November 2020, somehow this event kept getting postponed. Now, the positive side, though, is that it is now taking place with, I think, greater salience as part of the activities associated with the UN high-level dialogue on energy. So despite improvements in the status of women over the years, discrimination against them persists in a large number of societies across the world. And this discrimination is reflected in a variety of outcomes, like education, nutrition, violence against women, lack of autonomy in decision-making, and so on. As early as in the 1970s, one of the famous economists that India has produced, Pranav Bardhan, he hypothesized that the overall status of women was better in those parts of the country where they had a traditional role in agriculture and thus had some economic usefulness. Now, today it is well settled that economic empowerment of women helps in improvement of their overall status, and also in dilution of the social and cultural norms that discriminate against them. Therefore, greater economic empowerment across sectors, including the RE sector, is good for women. However, this is only part of the story. Greater labor force participation by women also helps in increasing the economic output of countries. And there is this much touted figure of 2015 that the IMF produced, that if the female and if the female participation in the Indian labor force is equal to that of men, then the output of our country will increase by as much as 27%. RE has a special significance for improving the status of women because greater participation of women in the RE sector can result in more direct positive outcomes. Improved biomass and solar cook stoves can, for example, result in positive health outcomes, saving women from the ill effects of fuel-based cooking. Solarization of Anganwadi centers, which we have tried to do to a limited extent in collaboration with the Ministry of Women and Child Development, can help ensure better health and education care for young children and their mothers. RE-based applications like solar baking ovens, solar fruit and vegetable dryers, RE-powered grain grinders can help promote entrepreneurship among women. In remote areas without grid-connected electricity or where the grid-connected supply is not very reliable, solar lighting can help women work more productively in the evening. It is encouraging that women participation in the RE sector is greater than that in the conventional energy sector. However, it is clear that there is a huge scope for improvement. The question we need to answer is what proactive steps can we take to enhance this participation from the current level of about 32%. And this is an IRENA figure, which I think is cited in one of their 2019 reports. As far as the government of India's efforts are concerned, some policies have been very proactively designed to help women. And one example is the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala program. The initial target under the program was 50 million subsidized LPG connections in the name of the adult women of eligible poor households. This was later raised to 80 million. And then I think in 2020, another 10 million target MNRE scheme for subsidizing small. Can I request everyone to mute their mics, please? MNRE's own scheme for subsidizing small biogas plants has contributed to the construction of about 5 million family-type biogas plants. We also have some other examples. Our lending arm, IREDA, gives a rebate of 0.5 percentage points in the interest rate on loans to women entrepreneurs. However, we do recognize that much more needs to be done. The MNRE is working on an initiative for promoting decentralized renewable energy livelihood applications. And this, we believe, would be very, very useful for women. As the initiative is envisaged, it would aggregate demand across sectors for such applications, promote innovative technologies, put in place frameworks for standardization and quality control, and also facilitate financing. We expect that the falling cost of RE technologies, particularly storage, would help us in this endeavor. Women participants in this event fittingly outnumber men, and I am sure they will bring much more nuance to the discussions and throw greater light on the practicable ways and means to move forward. One area for recommendations could be the organizational level proactive policies that could help us in the area. So let me end by committing on behalf of the MNRE that we will look at the recommendations that emerge out of this event with all seriousness and sincerity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, Mr. Chaturvedi, for the opening remarks and for setting the context for today's conversations. I now call on Director General, International Solar Alliance, His Excellency Dr. Ajay Mathur, for his keynote. Dr. Mathur.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Shiva. Mr. Chaturvedi, Ms. Ferguson, all the panelists and all the participants. A very good evening for those who are here in India, or a good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are in the world. It is such a pleasure to be here with all of you. I think I repeat what Mr. Chaturvedi said in highlighting both the importance as well as the relevance of today's seminar and of looking at what are the kinds of the steps that we can take in order to bring women into the front as far as renewable energy is concerned. I have found it easy to look at three, not very distinct, but three clear intersecting areas in which we have seen the role of women and the role of women leading in the case of renewable energy. The first, of course, and this is very clear from the participation of the panelists in this meeting, is that of women leadership, particularly in the renewable energy area. I think it speaks of the kind of commitment that there is of both the women folk as well as of the understanding, and this is something that I'll move to in the next two sections that I want to speak about as far as addressing renewables is concerned. The second is of women entrepreneurs. And here, I think the important issue is that the kinds of experiences that are needed in order to both develop and to sell renewable energy devices or renewable energy itself, we see a far greater link of women with the products and services than of men. And again, I'll come back to this in a moment. But the third area that I also see is of addressing women as users, something that Mr. Chaturvedi had mentioned when he talked of the Ujjwala scheme of the government of India and of looking at cleaner kitchens. Clearly, whether it is lighting in homes or whether it is cooking in homes, and increasingly we are seeing even when it is whether it is space cooling in homes, wherever there are energy needs, we see women taking a leading role. So the first point that I would like to make is that whether we are looking at the leadership in the energy area, whether we are looking at entrepreneurship in the energy area, or whether we are looking at consumers, we see women in the more central role than ever before. I think the experience of most of us here will highlight the point that we do see the importance of bringing women and the acceptance of women into the renewable energy area more than we have seen in previous, than we have seen in the conventional energy areas. There are many, many reasons for it. One reason, of course, is that because renewable energy is decentralized, the ability for women to be able to manage, to be able to provide useful services is far greater because of the kinds of constraints within which a large number of women live, not only in India, but across the world, of having to deal with the management of homes as well as the management of businesses that they are involved in. The second reason also is that the nature of the business is one in which you are closely associated with what the user needs, and therefore understanding what you are using is, I think, a key element. I only need to point out the centrality of understanding what lighting needs are or what cooking needs are for me to share the importance of having women in the center as far as lighting or cooking, both entrepreneurship and leadership are concerned. There is also a hypothesis that people in my area, the engineering area, have started believing in, and that has to do with the nature of the business of renewables itself. This is largely based on electronics. And we have seen that electronics, being logical, appeals far more to the brain that is, people call the left-handed brain and the right-handed brain, but what we have seen is that there are more successful electronics engineers who are women than there are men. As we move to the future and we talk about moving away from machine-based electrical engineering to logic-based electrical engineering, this is but inevitable. I hope that this makes the case that we see women in leadership positions, we see women in entrepreneurship positions, we see women in leading positions as far as the use of renewable energy is concerned. The next issue that I want to focus on is how do we ensure that the women in all of these positions we are able to support them, we are able to help them grow. The two sessions that follow, which is on leadership and on skills development, address some of these issues. But I also believe that the third issue and the fourth issue, which is of providing the financial support that is needed and of providing the kind of user feedback that is needed, are also important. Let me spend a few minutes on these two areas. On the issue of the ability for us to provide resources that women can access, I think it is important, and here I'm drawing heavily on the seminars, webinars that have been organized by SEWA, and Rima Ben is here and can speak probably more effectively to this. The fact that the banking system today largely is dominated by and focused on men. I think we need to relook at the kinds of successes that women entrepreneurs have had and include this into the risk mitigation equations as we look at the pricing of loans that is provided to this sector of entrepreneurs. I think one of the things that we have learned is that whether it is through the self-help groups or whether it is through the banking sector, the number of defaults where of organizations or individuals where women have been the prime borrowers of money have been much lower. I am told that the number is something like 12% for men-based organizations, and it is something like 3% for women-based organizations. While we may or not question these numbers, I think the trend is fairly clear. I would like, therefore, that a formal assessment of the credit worthiness of women and of organizations led by women is carried out so that we can price the money that is lent into women-based organizations more effectively than we have done in the past. The second point that I wanted to highlight was that of the user feedback. One of the things that we have seen is that the user feedback tends to be both much longer as well as a lot more stilted when dealing with conventional energy. With renewables, there are two things that happen. The ability to tweak renewable energy systems to meet people's demands is far greater than it is with conventional energy systems. Part of this is the electronics that goes into it, which is far more quote unquote tweakable than conventional machine-based systems. But part of it is also because the distance, the physical distance between the user and the supplier is far smaller in the case of renewable energy than it is in the case of conventional energy. These things together point out that the ability of women users to talk to women suppliers and talk of the systems that they would like is far greater than we have seen in the past. That we obviously have a great potential, but what it also suggests is that it is in our hands to help bring this potential to reality. I hope that the kinds of instrumentalities that we discussed today would help us in making this history into reality, this potential history into reality. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Mathur. That was a very, very incisive set of comments, and in fact, suggestions such as tracking the creditworthiness of women entrepreneurs can actually become a part of the ongoing efforts of, let's say, the MSME creditworthiness movement that we're trying to track, getting them onto the Udyam platform. And we can look at integrating this as a subset of that activity as we go forward. So we have formal data to base our evaluations on. So points very well taken, sir. And I think our moderators are listening and they would go deeper into it during the panel discussion. Thank you, sir. I now move on to our second keynote, Ms. Susan Ferguson, UN Women's Representative for India. Ma'am, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, Secretary Mr. Indu Shakir Chaturvedi, Dr. AJ Mather, Director General, International Solar Alliance, distinguished delegates, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It's such a pleasure to be with you here discussing this incredibly important topic. It really is a privilege to be speaking to you all and in such distinguished company and on such an important and relevant issue. Of course, this issue is important because solar power and renewables are essential for saving our planet. It's also relevant in that women's equality is essential to world development, and women's equality can be fundamentally shifted and improved through participation in the renewable industry. So these two issues, climate change and gender equality, are two of the most critical issues that we face in the world today, when the very survival of our species is really hanging in the balance. So I really want to congratulate you for holding such an important seminar today as well. So equal access for men, women, girls and boys to clean energy is a game changer in advancing a healthier, more resilient and sustainable future for all. Evidence suggests a high return on investment and positive financial, social and environmental outcomes when women and men are both involved in clean energy solutions. We can't afford to ignore or dismiss the critical role of women in the planning, producing, supplying and managing of clean energy. Women make a positive difference, and it's just so exciting actually for me to hear both the Secretary and Director General talking and saying exactly the same sorts of things. A number of factors have come together in recent years that have really unlocked new opportunities to accelerate sustainable energy solutions. Rapidly falling sustainable energy technology costs, improving technology quality and new business models. Each of these have the potential to accelerate women's empowerment through engagement in the sector. Women can be engaged from the top to the bottom of the industry. If we take the example of women entrepreneurs in more rural areas and at more grassroots level, they have enormous potential to manage supply chains and acquire new creditworthy customers in rural areas as they're close to their customers and know local circumstances, thus lowering the cost of customer acquisition. Women salespeople are often able to increase the reach of the energy sector as they're more likely to be able to reach other women. Women are, of course, 50% of the customer base. When initiatives develop effective distribution channels via female sales agents at village level, this helps also to increase demand for green technologies. Increased demand for these technologies translates again into more customers, which improves the chances that technology developers and distributors can raise revenues. It also translates into new business opportunities for women that can add value to their enterprises. For example, UN Women ran a small program in Odisha with marginal farmers, enabling access and ownership of new age clean solar dehydration technology. And this enabled these women to generate an additional income of 5,000 rupees every month. It might sound small to us, but actually it made a huge difference to women and their families. There's no doubt then that including women as decision makers, business holders, maintenance workers, salespeople, and customers brings about a virtuous cycle within the industry. More business for suppliers and women entrepreneurs, more jobs for women within the industry, more installation of solar panels and other technology, more access within communities, and therefore a greener world. This virtuous cycle has a flow-on effect to broader development outcomes for all. There's been a lot of research accumulated over the years that show that when women own and control income, they spend more of it than men do on food, health, clothing, and education for their children. This has positive implications for immediate well-being, of course, but it also contributes enormously to human capital and economic growth through improved health, nutrition, and education outcomes. When women own and control their own income, they also have more choices over the lives they lead. For instance, if they happen to be in an abusive family situation, they have an easier choice to be able to leave if they need to. Our solar powering of the Anganwadi centres in Madhya Pradesh, in partnership with the government, dramatically improved the quality of work and well-being for not only the Anganwadi workers, but also for children who avail themselves of services at the centre. Anganwadi workers, for example, were able to charge their phones and run small businesses on the side. Children were able to stay longer at centres as the centres could provide cooling fans. And no doubt this also helped their mothers, responsible for most of the care of these children, to focus on productive activities outside of the home, potentially. So therefore, solar power or renewable energy can amplify women's impact at household, family, community, and national level. So women are primary energy users and managers of energy. So they are also a huge potential market as consumers for domestic and productive use. And this is sometimes overlooked. Despite these advantages, women continue to be underrepresented in the energy value chain, as has already been stated to the previous two eminent speakers, at both the policy and decision-making level, in the workforce, and as business owners or leaders. The people involved in planning and policy making tend to benefit most from policies investments because they naturally reflect their own interests. It's not a deliberate thing, it's just a natural thing. Women's involvement in energy planning and policy formulation, including in decision making, is therefore a precondition for addressing gender differentiated risks and ensuring a policy environment and investments that enable both women and men and improve their role as energy entrepreneurs. At the workforce front in the energy sector, while the International Renewable Energy Agency estimates that about 32% of the global workforce in the modern renewable energy sector are women, the situation is dramatically different in many parts of the world. In the industry, women are concentrated often in administrative jobs rather than the higher status, higher income earning jobs that rely on an education in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM. While the International Renewable Energy Agency projects 42 million jobs globally in renewables by 2050, there's a need to ensure that these are equitably accessible for women and men, and therefore the benefits distributed equally. Diversity in the workforce will improve profits, since there's now a body of evidence that shows that workforce diversity does improve the business bottom line. Opening up these job opportunities to more women will only happen with deliberate policy intervention and leadership from the top. It will require the removal of structural, resource and skill barriers faced by women. And here again, I'd like to acknowledge the Indian government, and some of the initiatives that Secretary mentioned to us are really key and obvious examples of this structural change. Efforts will be required to improve women's access to technical education and information. And this includes, of course, encouraging women's greater participation in the STEM educational fields, promoting initiatives that encourage women to seek careers in the energy renewable field through targeted technical training, scholarships, internships, and academic and industry research. It's really important. These efforts also include removing some of the social norms and practices that have also already been spoken about, which affect women's occupational choices. For instance, the idea that girls don't make good leaders, or girls aren't good at maths, or women with children should be at home full-time with their children, because if not, it's damaging to the children's development. In fact, research in my own country, in Australia, recently showed that working women are more likely to have children who hold higher level jobs than children of women who stayed at home. So these social norms often affect women's ability to rise up through industry ranks. And some of these norms also are around women's safety. For some women, for example, it's still difficult to access education or jobs due to public safety in transport systems. And these issues, in turn, can be rooted in cultural norms that say a woman by herself is justifiably subjected to violence. The World Development Report launched by the World Bank on gender about 10 years ago showed clearly that such invisible norms, because often these are not visible to us, they showed clearly that these norms continue to constrain women's ability to access many social, political, and economic opportunities. They are the sticking point in women's development and gender equality. Other social norms that determine the amount of time women and men put into raising children also constrain women's ability to participate in the energy sector. In almost every country in the world, women put significantly more time into the invisible care work within the family. There are only so many hours in the day. If women spend the majority of their time looking after children or elderly folk, or growing food or preparing food or cleaning the house, we can't expect them to also rise easily to the top of the ladder within the renewable energy sector. There are solutions to these conundrums, and there are many examples of that both in India and elsewhere in the world. Businesses can promote safe working environments and develop family-friendly policies for staff. Childcare centres can form part of the work environment. Mentoring and role modelling systems can be set up to encourage women's leadership. Men can take a fairer share of the care work. Families can encourage their girls to excel in sciences in the school. And these two, of course, don't take any money. They're free to be done. It just requires a change of mindset. It needs all of us to shift the dial on these things. We all have a role to play. Governments, industry, community, women, men, you and I. Markets are asymmetrical. Women have less access to skills, information, finance, technology, goods and services. These things, coupled with the gender biases that I've mentioned, translate into additional investment risks and less attractive risk-reward profiles for women entrepreneurs in sustainable energy. And this despite evidence that women entrepreneurs can demonstrate more than twice the level of business capacity and success than men if given a chance to participate. Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, as well as bodies such as International Solar Alliance, have such a critical role in enabling women and men to be equal partners in the renewable energy field. And this leading from the top is so critical. And that's why this conference, such as, these discussions that we're having now are so important. It gives us hope and also strategies that together we will build back better post-pandemic. We will use all the talent, men and women. We need to continue to work together to mobilise investments in women-led energy enterprises. We need to promote innovative finance mechanisms, including blended financing. We can scale up applications of solar technologies for both domestic and productive purposes. We can exchange information, continue to trial, pilot, and develop new and innovative policies that are inclusive of women and men. So I commend you again for running this important conference, focusing on women in the renewable energy sector. And at UN Women, we remain committed to support the government unlock the potential of women as economic drivers of change through renewable energy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Ferguson, for putting the topics that we're going to discuss today in the overall social context and bringing in the comprehensive improvements that having women in the workforce bring, and then linking it back to the clean energy system, which adds the second layer of the sustainable development goals that we're working towards. So thank you very much. With that, I also thank Dr. Mathur and Secretary Chaturvedi for your initial remarks. I think the context is strongly set as we move into the panels. And now I will take the opportunity to welcome the first panel of the day. We have an illustrious set of speakers today as we go into this topic of women's leadership in renewables, envisioning a new world. I will take a moment to introduce our panelists. We have with us Ms. Gauri Singh, Deputy Director General of IRENA. Ms. Singh brings more than 30 years of experience in policy, advocacy, and project implementation in the fields of renewable energy and sustainable development from India and international systems. Prior to joining IRENA, Ms. Singh worked within India's federal government and at the apex level within the provincial governments. Federally, she was responsible for leading the development of the National Solar Mission of India policy in 2010, which is an early policy framework designed to drive solar power development across the country. She has held many senior positions at the state government levels and steered rural development, providing strategic planning and implementation guidance for large initiatives. Her work has also included poverty reduction, sustainable development within rural communities. She has been responsible for spearheading initiatives aimed at improving livelihoods for nearly 2 million poor women across the state of Madhya Pradesh. Welcome. We now also have with us today Dr. Viva Dhawan, Director General of TERI. Dr. Dhawan has been associated with the TERI since 1985. She has also served as a Vice Chancellor of the TERI School of Advanced Studies from 2005 to 2007. She is a Fellow of the National Academy of Sciences in India. Dr. Dhawan is actively involved in research as well as policy development, both at the national and international levels. She is a task force member of a number of committees of the Department of Biotechnology, the Biotechnology Industry Research Assistance Council, the Biotechnology Consortium of India Limited, and so on. She is currently serving as the Adjunct Professor, Consul General of South Asia Partnership, Michigan State University. She holds a number of other senior positions in institutions and academia. She is also a recipient of a number of national and international awards. Welcome, Dr. Dhawan. We have with us today Ms. Mahua Acharya, CEO of EESL Convergence. She was the former Asia Director of Climate Policy Initiative and was responsible for leading CPI in Delhi and Jakarta, while also supporting high-level strategic planning and further build-up of the organization. Mahua has almost 2 decades of international experience in green finance, renewables, carbon markets. She was Assistant Director General of the Global Green Growth Institute, an intergovernmental organization headquartered in Seoul with operations in 31 countries, and has held roles with mergers and acquisitions in ArcelorMittal, as well as been with World Bank in her early career. Welcome to the session, Mahua. We have with us today Ms. Suladja Firodia Motwani, Vice Chairperson of Kinetic Engineering Limited and Founder CEO of Kinetic Green Energy and Power Solutions. Ms. Motwani is an Indian entrepreneur, and the Kinetic Group has witnessed tremendous expansion during her term. It has set its foothold in the industry as a manufacturer offering a complete range of two-wheelers, including mopeds, scooters, and motorcycles. Ms. Motwani has recently restructured the group to expand its activities into automobile systems and green energy. Notably, she has founded a company, Kinetic Green Energy and Power Solutions, that aims to be an expert in green mobility and electric vehicles, and aims to bring this technology to the masses through the launch of electric autos, buggies, and small electric taxis. Welcome to the session, Ms. Motwani. We have with us today Dr. Arun Ghosh, the founder CEO of the Council on Energy, Environment, and Water since 2010. Dr. Ghosh is a public policy professional, advisor, author, columnist, and institution builder. He has published widely and advised on COP21 and other multilateral and bilateral negotiations. He was involved in conceptualizing and designing the International Solar Alliance. He has co-founded the Clean Energy Access Network. The UN Secretary General nominated him to the UN Committee for Development Policy in 2018. He has co-chaired the Energy, Environment, and Climate Track for India's Science, Technology, and Innovation Policy 2020. He is also the co-chair of the World Economic Forum's Global Future Council on Clean Air and is a member of the International High-Level Panel of the Environment of Peace Initiative. Welcome to the panel, Dr. Ghosh. And last but not least, we have our moderator for the session, Ms. Kanika Chawla, Program Manager at the UN Sustainable Energy for All. At the UN, as the UN Energy Program Manager, Kanika works with the UN Secretary General Special Representative and CEO for SE for All, and the co-chair of UN Energy to advance the twin objectives of energy access and energy transition at scale, especially in the context of the SDG Decade of Action. She engages with a wide range of government and private sector decision makers and partners to identify levers that advance SDG 7 objectives and supports the UN Energy Platform. Kanika has over 10 years of experience in clean energy and energy transition and policy markets, and has worked extensively on mobilizing clean energy finance for emerging economies. With that, I hand over the session to Kanika, if you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Shubha. And it's it's a great pleasure to be here. And so first, my great appreciation and thanks to MNRE and the International Solar Alliance for hosting this and for giving me this opportunity. This is personal. This is, of course, it's important to think about how do you scale the participation of women in clean energy and women's leadership at kind of almost think of it at an academic and at scale, really. But for me, this is very much about, in the last 10 years when I first started working on this, neither were these conversations happening, nor was this kind of panel something that we saw very often. And so these have not, it's not been a linear path. And so and you've kind of had to find your allies along the way to have made it so far. And I'm just glad that we're having this conversation today for all of the people that have joined us and across the various platforms we're going to hear this, because it's not just about, how do you get more women? Of course, it's really important to think about how do you get more women into STEM subjects? How do you address some of the barriers? But also, how does this just become a career option that you can explain at home? And that's kind of where it starts. How does it, when you're in university, how do you think about, I'm actually going to work in renewable energy, right? And that is like, okay, but that's like, what are you going to do? And that it's not just a singular objective to kind of just be an engineer and think about sort of the various applications of that in advancing the energy transition. So I'm really glad that we're having this conversation. So thank you very much. And this is a very illustrious panel, so there's very little for me to do. But what I think we should do is just have a really open and candid conversation in terms of identifying some of the barriers that we need to overcome, and speak openly about them, and then talk about what are some of the, as Secretary Chaturvedi said right at the start, there are already quite a lot of efforts underway. So which ones are working well, which ones need to be scaled up. And I think that Dr. Mathur said at the start as well that this session would be most useful if we talked about real implementable solutions. So it would be good if we kind of didn't talk so much in abstract and talked quite kind of focused on action. So with that, as Shubha said, we have a really illustrious panel and a lot of people who have been, inspirational and very supportive of me. So I'm really glad to be moderating this discussion. So we'll start with you, Gauri, if you wanted to maybe just frame the discussion as you've seen it, because as an early pioneer in this space, did you even realize that you were pioneering, or did this kind of happen to you by chance and then suddenly everyone else is just looking up to you?
Thanks, Kanika, and it's really a pleasure to be here. And it's so exciting to be amongst panelists who are really creating waves in their own field. What I'd really like to do is maybe spend just a couple of minutes in trying to place the context before us and move away slightly from renewable energy, its obvious and huge role in clean cooking and decentralized lighting, but into the larger aspect of where we hope to be seeing this whole space as we move forward towards 2050. Irina just launched a recent report, the Energy Transition Outlook. And what we have found is we're looking at something like increasing the deployment that currently of renewable energy, which is currently at around 2,800 to about 28,000 gigawatts. This would also mean almost tripling the energy generation from renewable. But what it also means is that renewable energy, which is done well for as far as electrification is concerned, and it'll continue to play a very dominant role as we move ahead. But there are sectors like transport, heavy industry, and buildings that need much more push. So what I'm really saying is that we are really at the cusp of where I think the conventional energy was in the 1980s. And do we want to go the same route, which is, if you're looking at conventional energy, you're looking at women participation of about 22%. And as the secretary pointed out, we had done a gender survey at IRENA, and the participation in renewable energy is at 32%. But if you disaggregate, it is almost 45% of it is in admin jobs, and about 28% in STEM related jobs. So what I want to really look at is, when we are sitting at a cusp of how, of the whole energy sector really undergoing a transition and a transformation, do we want to sit and think the same way, or which is, a business as usual, looking at incremental policy, tinkering here and there at periphery? Or do we really want to look at thinking at a much bigger picture and looking at how women can get engaged in that? And I think there's scope for that. I think there's a huge scope when you're looking at the kind of mobilization that we see of women in rural areas. And I really want to, and I can talk a bit more about it, but what I really want to say is, if you're really looking at implementable policy, then we need to be thinking out of the box. And my favorite really would be looking at PM Kusum, which is such a nice name, which is in the agriculture sector. And when you're looking at the agriculture sector, there's a huge perception that it's a very male-dominated sector, which it isn't. So, the men actually get involved only in the marketing, but the other activities get managed by women. So, if we look at how well our women groups have been doing, is there a case for looking at supporting and in fact encouraging with affirmative measures women groups actually taking on these solarization of the agriculture feeders? And let me stop there, and maybe I can come again and talk a little bit more about it.
Thank you. No, it's always so. I just think that you always bring like this really interesting perspective of how it it isn't enough to just tweak at the margin. Like we need to think at a blue skies level. And I think that that's a really interesting point, Gauri. And I'll take that now to Dr. Dhawan, although I can't see her now. And Dr. Dhawan, turning to you, I think, just in the context of as we are creating new energy markets and thinking about, new energy paradigm, we often tend to think of it very much in kind of economic and technical point of view. And how do we make sure that some gender aspects, but also other social aspects can be mainstreamed? And in your experience, what has been some of the barriers to overcome when you're trying to think about, creating these new markets and making sure that we kind of build with a strong foundation from the very start? You're still on mute. Perfect.
Hi, good evening. Well, we have said so much about the role of renewables and role of women in leadership. The way I would like to put it, that renewable energy is going to grow in leaps. It's going to be a very important source of energy. Even today, we have 24% of total installed capacity of the world in India. It ranks 5th globally in installed renewable energy capacity, and we have ambitious target of 175 gigawatt of RE capacity by 2022. Solar and wind sector, they are expected to create 10 lakh and 1.8 lakh jobs by 2022. Now, I'm putting this framework that in years to come, there are lots and lots of opportunities for jobs, and women, they must come as an important partner. If not equal, I'll say they should be a very important partner in this. Now, we also know, and it's not just restricted to renewable energy, but otherwise there is positive correlation between gender diversity of workforce, women leadership, and better financial performance. That was McKinsey's report in 2018. Even today, when we look at women form 32% of RE workforce globally. And in India, in the rooftop solar sector, it has 11% of the female workforce. But as mentioned earlier, the number of women working in core engineering functions is far lower than number of women working in support functions in the corporate segment. Now let's look into what are the challenges, and which are not just restricted to renewable energy, they are practically for all sectors. When we look at the board results, and every year we find that women have excelled, but not in rural areas alone, but even in cities, you find that women in leadership positions, they are lagging behind. And there are a number of reasons for it. Even women themselves, they are little reluctant to take up technical jobs, even if they are technically qualified for that. And somewhere it is a perception. And I remember when I was in Terry University, we had lots and lots of girls, rather just one boy in the whole group of 30 students and all girls. And when we discussed, it was said that for girls, they normally opt for softer options like biotechnology and not so much for engineering, which should not be the case, but that is a sort of perception which is among the society as a whole. If we look at rural energy, perhaps it's also true that it requires extensive traveling to project sites, and typically they are located at far off places. So it becomes difficult for women to leave their family, their kids behind. And another problem which normally arises is that when they're in the beginning of their career, that is also the time that they have responsibility of upbringing children. So they are very reluctant to take up jobs which requires traveling. And balancing work with family becomes little difficult. There are also issues related to perceived safety and security. So that's another issue which is very serious in our country. But more important is the safety risks that are associated with physically intensive on-site work. I'll just draw an example, like, and that is from agriculture, and I've been from the agriculture field. We know that it's the women workforce which works in the fields. But if you look at the farm machinery, it is all inclined towards usage by the male members. The tractors, their height, the pressure that you need to run a tractor, they have never thought that even women will have to do that. So somewhere when we are designing our rural energy, the maintenance part of it, we need to ensure that it will be handy, women will be able to work in those particular equipments or those particular lines.
Dr. Dhawan?
So we have to ensure
Hear you and your voice is breaking.
in that.
Maybe we'll definitely come back to you, but just I think that you made some really interesting points also about how we can't actually build we can say that we have the opportunity to create a new energy market, and so we can do a lot of blue skies thinking. But I think she raises a really interesting point that we will continue to obviously exist within a larger socioeconomic setup, and there's a lot of social conditioning with which we all are within which we are all operating. And so there needs to be some kind of adjustment within that as well. And so with that, actually, I'll turn to you, Mahua, because I think that it's very, having known you for some time and seen the work that you've done, it's really interesting to me because you chose to, to work at the intersection of kind of energy policy, governance, but also finance, and all of those spaces individually are also often occupied by men. And so this definitely each of the worlds that you have been working in has been fairly male dominated. So what has been your experience of navigating that space, and what's been some of the things that have helped you make your way through that?
Anika, thank you for that. And so it's so nice to see this panel. I must say, I'm rarely at panels with so many women on them. So it's really nice that we have the leadership of MNRE to do this. I mean, nice is an understatement. I must thank MNRE, and I must thank the ISA, and I must thank Indushekar Chaturvedi, Secretary of MNRE, to put this together at the highest level. Because in our country and in many countries that I have worked in, there isn't institutional bias or motivated bias or deliberate bias. However, we live in a society where we have things have been done a certain way for hundreds of years, and without deliberate effort at promoting diversity, at promoting more women's participation, and designing policies that will work in a more inclusive way, I think we'll have a harder time to get to an outcome that we all in fact want. So, I mean, I must really thank ISA, and I must really thank MNRE and panelists who are with me today for joining this discussion and for even having this kind of dialogue. You're right, Kanika, in the field I have chosen from the time I graduated, it has been largely male dominated, the business of finance, and I made a deliberate effort to understand finance of Wall Street. It's very male dominated. I have, however, also worked in countries that happen to have very few women at the leadership roles. And much as we all make the effort, unless certain interventions are needed, I'm coming to the conclusion these days, is that we must make certain interventions. We must make some proactive steps, whether they're policy steps, just as we're able to make policy steps that have, let's say, concessional rates of finance, as I heard today. for women and participation, we've had them in India for years. Much as we have been able to do that, I think it's not impossible sometimes to have deliberate policies that remind us, all of us, women included, that we must do a little bit more to just think about diversity, or just think a little bit more about inclusivity. And it's not always easy. In the business of recruitment, it's not always easy. We all have targets. Many institutions have targets of 50% representation at the topmost levels. It's not easy to get there. It's a chicken and egg. Many women I know don't want to come to places unless they are comfortable that there's a certain level of women already represented there. So it's very difficult. The expectations of my own position, where I am today in a position where I do make certain decisions, and I would like to have a more inclusive workplace, is I'd say even higher, because I'm held to standards that I feel I'm held to standards that are expected to be higher. Now we have to make certain interventions. I'm also so glad that we have Arun up here on this panel. It's also not often that one is on a panel with so many ladies, but also a panel talking about inclusiveness and women in leadership with men involved with them. I just feel sometimes we don't do that. And in fact, we all live in a society where everybody's at the workplace, where everybody's in the business of making these policies. So I'd say that's the second one. I mean, when we talk about inclusivity, we do need to make we just have to make these efforts. We have made a lot of movement in India, and I've now lived in a number of countries. I've worked in plenty more. Some of the policies that we have in India are very, very progressive. India came out with a policy to push for women at the boards of companies and representation of the boards of companies well before many countries did that. It's a different matter that we criticize ourselves for not having gotten there, but I think sometimes we miss that this forward thinking was done a long time ago, and it's a difficult discussion to have, but it's not a difficult topic to touch upon. So I can't say it's not easy to be in a workplace that has historically been dominated. But things have changed so much in the last 10 years, so much, that I feel that there is a space. We have this discussion today, and the discussion is not just about appliances and cooking, rural cooking and so on, because of course that's a need. I mean, we've all known that. That's a huge need and it's become normal. But there are other issues, like, to answer your question, we're in a larger marketplace, we're in a larger economy, we're in a larger socio setup. So I'm just so glad we're having this kind of discussion. I'm so glad that in fact even Secretary MNRE talked about proactive policies, and I noted his words down that it will be taken with seriousness and sincerity, and that's really exactly I think what we need.
Thank you, Mahua. And I think you speak for all of us when you talk about, celebrating how far we've come, but also not accepting status quo until we actually get to kind of, where we feel equally represented. And I think as Dr. Dhawan was saying, it's also, you need to feel that level of that you have the space, right? And for that space to be created. I'll take that to Suladja, to you, because I think you bring a different perspective to it, very much from, from an enterprise point of view. And often I find that that you're a female entrepreneur is something that is kind of almost imposed upon you, right? You're just an entrepreneur. And you are doing exactly what other entrepreneurs are doing. So how actively is gender a lens in your work? And how much does it play into decision-making? You're on mute.
First of all, a very good evening to everyone, to all my co-panelists and the participants of this program. I want to also thank MNRE for organizing this wonderful event. and generating a larger dialogue on renewables, and specifically on a larger role for women in renewables. I think it's an exciting topic, and I want to thank everybody for their insights as well. Kanika, you brought about the perspective of female entrepreneur, but let me give it a different spin actually. I also represent an industry which is relying on renewable energy, which is electric vehicles. So not only I'm a female entrepreneur, but I'm also in the renewable energy space as part of the EV industry. So let me speak a little bit about the women and the EV industry per se, as a subset of the renewable energy sector that's coming up. And then I'll share my own perspectives as a female entrepreneur as well. So I actually feel that it's a very exciting opportunity that women have ahead of them to become larger and larger participants in this amazing EV transformation that's going to take place. And I'll tell you why I'm excited about this. I'm excited about this because unlike even the existing number of women in the renewable sector as a whole, which is around 30%, women are highly underrepresented in the automotive sector. So we had just about 15% women in the automotive sector. And even those would really be less in the STEM positions and more in the other administrative positions, finance, marketing, so on and so forth. So I think that in fact, the EV transformation that's coming actually is an opportunity for more and more women to be part of this very exciting and one of the largest industries in the world. Just to give you a perspective, EV is a disruptive opportunity. Electrifying the world's transport sector through electric vehicles is going to lead to a transformation of the sector by itself. And that's not very far away. I'm talking about the coming decade, the next 10 to 15 years. If you look at all kinds of studies and research and our own experience, our own estimates, currently less than 5% of vehicles in the world are electric, but it is going to be more than 50% in the next 10 years. And certain segments and certain countries, in fact, will have more than 75 to 80% vehicles which are electric. To give you an example, the small vehicles or intra-city vehicles, like the golf carts, buggies, which are more campus vehicles, and then two-wheelers, three-wheelers, buses, which are intra-city, smaller cars. I think that in the next decade, they will be predominantly electric. Maybe even 80% kind of numbers will be electric. And that leads to a massive amount of new jobs, a massive amount of reskilling, massive amount of new entrepreneurship opportunities, which are there ahead of everyone. And I think women can, really look at this as a new way to enter the auto sector. Why I think it's important, why I think it's exciting is, first of all, EV industry is going to need new skills. And there's going to be a massive dearth of skills in the EV sector, whether it's in the components, in the vehicle designing itself, in the EV ecosystem, in the software or IoTs that power, the whole connectivity of the electric vehicle segment. And I think, therefore, if there is a dearth of skills, then those who have skills, whether they are women or men, have a much better chance of accelerated entrepreneurship or employment. So if you are finding it difficult to compete with men in the traditional auto sector, here you have an EV sector where there is a dearth of skills. So certainly you can be definitely that much more employable, that much more attractive as a candidate. Secondly, electric vehicles are more about electronics and less about mechanical. So you have much more software in an EV than you have mechanical parts. And I think women traditionally and more so lately have been doing a wonderful job in electrical and electronic kind of areas. If you go to China or Taiwan, most of the women on the shop floor of companies which make electronic parts are women. Even within our own group, we have a company, Kinetic Communications, we have a company, Kinetic Hygiene, which is making electric motors and EMS systems for automotive. We have 100% women on the shop floor itself, because these require more, they don't require the physical labor. It's not like a furnace or, what typically one thinks about auto industry, that's you're lifting some heavy parts. It's about being good at your job and having the, sincerity and training to do an electronic assembly or whatever that requires dexterity, focus, sincerity. So I think women can not only be in all kinds of other departments, but also on the shop floor in EVs. Thirdly, there's going to be a lot more services as the world is moving to connected and shared transport using EVs. automotive industry will also be more about services and less about simply manufacturing. So that's another new dimension of employment opportunities. But last but not the least, I think what's happening in the EV ecosystem is that it's going to be led by a huge number of startups who are coming with fresh ideas how to transform the sector. The traditional non-auto companies are coming out with very innovative solutions. So you don't have to deal with the old mindsets. Some of the reason why you have less women in the EV auto industry is because also of the mindsets of the traditional ways of hiring and running a company. Like I'll tell you, many automotive companies, R&D departments don't have ladies' toilets, and I'm not exaggerating. It's because they've always had men. So there's also this whole mindset and legacy. But whereas when new startups come up in a new sector, they come with new thought process, new mindsets. And I think so. Therefore, requirement of new skills, massive transformation, massive growth opportunity, and new startups. I think at the cusp of all three, is a new set of opportunities for women, both as employees of an organization who are in EV sector, or as entrepreneurs, micro entrepreneurs themselves, who are creating new business models and new set of solutions in the whole EV ecosystem. So I think it's certainly a great opportunity for women to come ahead in this sector. Now, what can be done? How it can happen? Will it happen on its own? I don't think it will happen on its own. And I think if I were to give a couple of specific suggestions, I think certainly it needs a conscious effort. Two things are needed. One is we need some more champions for the cause. MNRE, of course, and other organizations that all of you represent should take up the cause of promoting more women in renewables and specifically, let's say, EV sector. There needs to be more awareness. There needs to be some new ways or new opportunities for skilling women to be ready for this sector. So partnerships with the HR ministry or other areas in which we can actually make women aware about the opportunities and provide the required skills, maybe on some preferred basis. I don't like the word reservation, but somehow if we can have more women to come forward to participate in these programs and offer them this kind of incentive or, awareness and opportunities, that will really help to get them ready for this sector. And second, I think more importantly, I would say that capital. I think, when this sector is so vibrant and there are so many new entrepreneurship opportunities, can MNRE create, can CSL create special funds, special, opportunities for women supported by capital to put up projects in this sector? I think that will make the biggest difference. It could be by way of pilots, which are specifically reserved for women. There can be partnership with NGOs who work for women and women livelihoods. OEMs like us can be roped in as partners, and we can create actual real life pilots to show how women can be employed in this sector. I'll give you a couple of quick examples. We worked with the UP government and provided electric three-wheelers to the Gulabi gang, who were self-employed. It's a women organization in the rural UP. And these women became rickshaw drivers, and started earning a livelihood for their family. We also worked in Dantewada, which is an Naxalite belt in Chhattisgarh, again with an NGO and the local administration, and gave 100 e-rickshaws to women as a means of self-employment. And this program was in fact talked about on Man Ki Baat by a Prime Minister.
Suladja.
Such examples can be created, will be great. And I think, that will really help to take the sector forward.
Yeah, thank you. I think that this point around, also the ripple effect of empowering women and especially in economic value generating activities is a really important one. But I want to pick up the point that you raised before around more champions for the cause and turn to our last panelist, who I know personally is a champion for the cause. And I've been a beneficiary of the kind of support that he personally as well as institutionally has extended to women. So Arun, to you then, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what motivates, especially as, because the CEW Women in Sustainability Initiative is now actually several years old and started at a time when CEW was still a relatively young institution. What drove you at that point already, despite having fairly good gender balance across different levels of operations, to still promote and institutionalize something like that, and also just kind of show the mirror to yourself and share share the report card of what is good as well as bad with the world. So what motivates something like that?
Thank you, Kanika, and it's great to be on this panel with so many people I respect so much. But first of all, many thanks to MNRE, ISA for organizing this. And I would also argue, given that we kicked off with Gauri, I mean, just last week, I was discussing with my colleagues about sharing Irina's latest, the next round of the survey on applying the gender lens and renewables. So all these institutions, whether Government of India, ISA, IRENA, it's really, really encouraging that the institutions are taking this as a critical issue. So let me answer your question bluntly, Kanika. First of all, what motivates? It's one word: normalization. I think the fact that we still think that women in any workforce is something to be, of course, it requires a lot of effort, but the fact that we've not normalized it, the fact that we've not normalized that women can be in leadership positions, the fact that we have not normalized that we can have a woman as a boss. I mean, this is a massive undertaking. And this is why the role of institutions becomes extremely important, not just of individuals. So let me quickly try and break this down the way I look at it in the broader space of renewable energy. I see there are three, and I apologize for maybe oversimplifying, but I see there are sort of three buckets in which we can find the role of women in renewable energy. One is the role of women in large enterprises. The other is the role of women as sort of entrepreneurs, as small entrepreneurs, whether in the rural areas or urban areas. And the third is the role of women in renewable energy in the policy ecosystem. In each of these, in my mind, we have to overcome different types of biases, although the biases actually also cut across these three buckets. In the large enterprises, we've got to overcome this bias of technology. In the smaller enterprises or in rural areas, we have to overcome the bias of financial exclusion. And in the policy ecosystem, whether it's in think tanks like us or in government, we have to overcome the bias of leadership. Now, how do we go about that? So many of you on this panel have already talked about the need to go beyond just the STEM story of that's the only kind of role that one can be playing in renewable energy. But, if I can ask Suladja, who's running a company, it's not just about, who's tinkering with the technology. It's someone who's developing the business models for a particular geography, someone who's developing the financial models. As Suladja mentioned, and I recall I went to IIT Madras a couple of years ago. You can imagine there's a big automobile ecosystem there. And the room was full of half women, half men. And they were like, we are now all computer science engineers because no one wants mechanical engineers in the auto sector anymore. So once we begin to think that in large enterprises, it's not just the chief product officer who matters, it's also the chief finance officer who matters, the chief marketing officer who matters, and of course, the entire ecosystem of people who will lead up to that level, we begin to imagine a very different future than this very STEM-oriented approach towards women's participation and women's leadership. In the case of the smaller rural entrepreneurs or urban setting, we've just at CW just released a report looking at this, and we find that 39% of the women micro entrepreneurs had no assets to start with. So the first asset they ever owned is something to do with renewables. But that's where the chicken and egg comes in. In order to own the asset, you got to get a loan. And because you don't have a collateral and you are probably not taking the monetary decisions in the household, the bank, the rural bank, etc., does not want to give you any money. So, to go back to Dr. Mathur's call that let's be specific, I think we need to have at least impact investors. Let's not start dreaming about the mainstream investors. At least the impact investors, do they have a gender lens? Do the policymakers, I think Suladja gave the example of the skilling. Similarly, can we have the policymakers putting in specific policies for encouraging rural micro entrepreneurship by women? And then ask the bank managers to report how many women they've lent to rather than ask the women to answer how many banks they've gone to. My final point about the policy ecosystem is this overcoming the bias of leadership. And this is where, Kanika, 5 years ago, you and I kicked off the Women in Sustainability Initiative at CW. But what I am particularly proud about is the gender KPIs that we publish at CW. Not proud about the actual numbers. We have a long way to go. But we are measuring, how many women are in leadership positions, how many women are first authoring papers, how many women are participating in panel discussions, how many women are on TV, how many women are in the press. If you don't get visibility, out of sight, out of mind. But I think more institutionally, again, I appeal to government and non-governmental organizations to overcome the bias of leadership. We've got to look at training, actively investing and training in women leaders. I want to close by simply saying that, we like to say in this development sector more broadly, capacity building. Unfortunately, capacity building is a noun. It helps you get grants. Building capacity is a verb. If you don't actively work on it, it's not going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think that's a really strong message to end on, the appeal sort of also to institutions, right? There is, of course, a role that women will play for themselves. There is a role that women will play collectively. There's a role that men will play to support women, but none of that will go all the way if institutions don't shift. And I think that what I'm hearing and what my takeaway from all of this is that we cannot keep having gender as an add-on. We can't have gender-specific programs without mainstreaming gender in all our programs. There is no that X project has a gender lens or X training for women. It is every training. So the Surya Mitra program, for instance, should have within it built in, a specific focus on women. As Gauri said, the Kusum scheme, like every single scheme, it cannot just be that in a few feel-good sectors. And this is not just for renewables, this is not just for the government, this is across the board. And that's very hard to do because it is kind of turning the existing structure on its head. But from my experience, as well as with a lot of hope, I say that it will be something that I'm convinced will yield great returns. It makes good economic sense. It makes good, it's a matter of equity and justice. And I think that those things are deeply enshrined in our policy making as well. Unfortunately, I would have liked to have come back, and I have a lot of questions for all of our panelists, but we are at time. But I would actually also encourage everyone who's participating today to also maybe reach out, because the people you see on the panel today are role models. Maybe they didn't want to be that, maybe they didn't set out to be that, but they are that. And I have benefited very much from the mentorship of several of you, and including Mr. Jagdale at MNRE. And so I'll thank you all the panelists for this, and for being so honest and candid and open, and for sharing your experiences, and hand back over to Shubha in the interest of time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kanika, and thank you, panelists. That was just warming up. I wish we had more time to get into that, but we do have our next panel now, which will go a bit more into the real case studies of women who have actually done this work on the ground. And so as we get into women entrepreneurs in renewable energy, a gateway to innovation and in economic growth, I call on Dr. Megha Pushpendra, lead strategic communication of the International Solar Alliance, moderator of this session. And I'll take a moment to introduce her. Megha has been part of the core team for energy transition during the adoption of the Paris Climate Agreement in 2015, and has since led strategic communications for renewable energy, especially solar, at the provincial level with the government of Madhya Pradesh, the federal level with the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, and at the international level now with the International Solar Alliance. Her work includes global stakeholder engagement, including sovereign governments, private sector, MDBs, NGOs, think tanks, and academia. Megha has also been instrumental in initiating a constructive dialogue to bring gender focus in RE projects, and intends to take it forward with a goal-oriented approach. With that, I hand over to Megha to introduce her panel and take the conversation ahead. Megha, over to you.
Thank you, Shubha. Thank you so much. And thank you, Kanika. Well, What a fascinating session that was. And many thanks to all the participants for this very able and pointed discussion. With this, I welcome you all to the second session of Women in Renewable Energy and Sustainability event, titled as Women Entrepreneurs in Renewable Energy, a Gateway to Innovation and Economic Growth. We have heard Secretary Eminari, Director General International Solar Alliance, and Country Representative UN Women India, and have taken notes for how to move forward. We have a scintillating panel of experts today with us, and little remains for me to say. But just to sort of touch upon the larger context, I would like to bring the attention to the present time situation. The pandemic has heightened human suffering, undermined the economy, turned the lives of billions of people around the world upside down. And as we are bracing ourselves for coming challenges, it is quite certain that employment opportunities are going to take a direct hit and would further shrink. This would impact women disproportionately, that goes without saying, and we need to take a non-conventional approach to solve the issue. I would like to bring your attention to the fact that in energy space, we are in an interesting phase right now. Several opportunities are emerging in the renewable energy segment due to green transition. These opportunities can be utilized for women in two ways, particularly increasing women's participation in green industries and in using green technology to enhance existing women-led micro enterprises. And as I said before, we need to take non-conventional approach to enable women participation both ways. Entrepreneurship in renewable energy sector for women presents itself as a powerful solution, as it creates jobs, fuels innovation, and further investment in health and education. Women entrepreneurship in renewable energy holds the transformational potential. Now let's talk about the myths that usually come afloat. Myths such as women-led rural enterprises generally fall, led rural enterprises generally fall through, have been broken. We are privileged to have with us today leaders in the panel who have supported thousands of women and have navigated through a range of institutional arrangements, from identifying, training to building and sustaining enterprises. They have ensured that women not only collectively run these enterprises, but they also successfully incubate others in the community. We are also privileged to have representation from leading international organizations who are making steady progress in implementing projects and building capacity in India and as also globally. We have with us today Ms. Rima Nanavati, Rima Ben, Secretary General, Self-Employed Women Association, SEWA. Rima ji needs no introduction. Rima ji is an Indian social worker known for her humanitarian services as one of the leaders of Self-Employed Women's Association of India. She was honored by the Government of India in 2013 by the Padma Shri. We are honored to have Rima ji on the panel. Ms. Megan Fallon, founder, board member, and CEO, Barefoot College. Megan is the former CEO of India's Barefoot College International and now an active board member. Megan is working to build a universal learn-to-earn digital platform called LEAP to support rural farmers with high-tech approaches to learn frontline climate adaptation, mitigation, and regeneration strategies. A focus on bringing more women into a formal farming ecosystem is being developed through climate finance incentives under her leadership. We have with us Ms. Cecil Martin Phipps, Unit Chief Communication and Partnership, International Solar Alliance. Ms. Cecil Martin Phipps is currently Chief of Unit for Communication in International Solar Alliance, and she previously has worked at the French Agency for Environment and Energy Management in the International Affairs Directorate, developing projects on climate change, energy, and environment in Brazil, Africa, MENA region, and Asia. Previously, she was a deputy advisor to 2 French ministers in charge of ecology and sustainable development. She graduated in public administration and international studies from Paris Institute of Political Science in 2003. She got a certificate on financing and deploying clean energy from Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies and Yale School of Management in 2020. And she recently has completed an executive educational program on public-private partnerships for infrastructures from Harvard Kennedy School in May 2021. We have with us Mr. Praveen Saxena, CEO, Skill Council for Green Jobs. Over a distinguished career of over 4 decades, Dr. Saxena has held a number of senior roles with the Government of India, including serving as Director General, National Institute of Solar Energy, and advisor to Government of India, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. His work has covered research and development, policy formulation, national strategies, planning and coordination, bilateral and multilateral collaborations, and corporate sector participation to ensure effective implementation of program. At the global stage, Mr. Saxena has led and represented the nation during official and diplomatic visits to over 30 countries, and he has been an integral part of various United Nations agencies and other international organizations such as UNIDO, IRENA, UNDP, and has advised various governments on development of renewable energy sources. Last but not the least, we have on the panel Ms. Suhaila Khan, Country Program Manager, We Empower Asia, UN Women. Suhaila has an extensive experience in management of large-scale transformational programs on women's economic empowerment. She aims to integrate feminist principles and strategies in programs to enable women to recognize and challenge discrimination. Her expertise lies in the area of program development, implementation, monitoring, measuring impact, and partnership building. She has previously worked with central and state government, and currently at UN Women, she is leading the EU's We Empower Asia program. Suhaila is a Ford Fellow and holds a master's degree in public policy from the University of Michigan. So with such esteemed panels, each of them have played an important role in creating a level playing field for women entrepreneurs. They have enabled women within communities to become small business owners, and their consistent efforts at global level have expanded the funnel and have encouraged more women to start enterprises. I'm sure their recommendations will help the policymakers present in the room to chart out a constructive way forward. With this, and with the permission of Secretary Eminari and all the dignitaries present in the room, I would like to open the discussion. First of all, Rimaji, I would like to invite you, and I would like to start with you. Seva's indomitable spirit, courage, and persistent efforts have made a difference in the lives of many women. You work with informal workers, and despite the significant contributions of to the nation's economy, they're largely uncounted or undercounted or completely invisible. And Seva is currently 1.5 million strong now. So I just wanted to know from you that what are the innovative ways you, as single largest women workers and trade union in India, have adopted to encourage and support women working in the field of renewable energy? The floor is yours, please.
Thank you so much, Meghaji. And I would like to thank the Secretary MNRE, also Dr. Jagdale, Dr. Mathur also, for creating such a wonderful platform to present the voices of millions of women in the informal sector, as you rightly said, Meghaji, who are normally, whose voice and also the visibility always remains a challenge. It is heartening to hear that how India has been taking the lead in the space of renewable energy also at the international level. And like all other success stories, even here, I think we have several challenges, but the good aspect is that in spite of these challenges and also the pandemic of COVID, which has really slowed down, we continue to fight and proceed further, where our members always say that, you know, we shall overcome, or hum honge kamyab. And as we were listening in the earlier panel, I think the informal sector women workers do not have inhibitions, and innovation is their coping strategy. The women in the informal sector are always willing to take on newer challenges, take on risks, and also take on newer skills. And this is what we have been experiencing in the space of renewable energy. So you see women as solar technicians, as mobile technicians, you know, and But I think what is really needed is that how do you bring flexibility in deciding the eligibility criteria? So what we were listening in the earlier panel, and I'm sure that, with Dr. Jagdale here, he would definitely take this up when the policies are being framed, as to how do we encourage more and more women to take up green skills. Today, I would like to share a couple of examples of how women have been doing innovations in the informal sector. And I think organizing is the key. And that's what SEVA has been supporting the women with, is the sisterhood, which helps them build their confidence, which helps them take on newer skills and newer challenges. And that is what I'm sure would also convey a message to the other partners of the International Solar Alliance, but also in our country as well. I think what I would like to mention here is that we all know that Gujarat manufactures 70% of the country's salt, and however, before getting access to energy, these women were literally bonded laborers, and getting access to green energy, these salt pan workers moved from just becoming mere workers or bonded laborers to entrepreneurs in their own trades. And this is where the role of different agencies comes into play. So these women used to borrow from traders or money lenders year after year, and while we all pay rupees 25 per kg of salt, these women hardly used to earn 14 paise per kilogram of salt. So you could imagine what was the loss that these women were. And that was purely because of energy poverty. These women did not have access to clean energy. So with the access to solar technology of pumping out brine, the dependency of these salt pan workers on traders for working capital or sustenance capital for purchase of diesel oil to run their pumps was completely, removed. And after 2 to 3 years of owning the solar pumps, the savings due to avoiding diesel oil led to a state where these women now have a choice whether who do they sell the salt to and at what price would they want to sell the salt to. So they were able to now almost get double the price of the salt. So this is a classic example of how renewable energy leads to fostering entrepreneurship. And I think the framework that led to such success is you have gender inclusion, financial inclusion, the banks coming forward to give affordable loans, giving a longer term maturity for repayment of loans. And I think that led to this. And I'm very grateful that, MNRE was the first one in 2016 and 17 to give subsidy to these salt pan workers through NABARD. And as a result of that, these women were able to repay back their EMIs regularly with zero defaults. And this has led to 100% realization of the back-end subsidy. So with 200 pumps in 2016-17, where we piloted with MNRE this whole thing, today we have 4,000 and plus, so almost 7,000 women owning these solar pumps. So this is the kind of entrepreneurship that we are talking about. And as a result of that, I think it led to another whole initiative where women, again, the first of its kind, these panels that the women have because of the solar pumps, during the off season, the women have formed their own cooperatives or collectives, and they have set up a 2.7 megawatt solar park, the first ever solar park, which is completely owned and managed by the women themselves. And this 2.7 megawatt park, apart from energy business, is generating a close to 2,000 to 2,500 green jobs. And so I think these are some of the initiatives which we need to take to scale. And therefore, I would really like that, the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, the International Solar Alliance, and organizations like ours, we come together to foster green skilling program on a larger scale, post-COVID recovery. How do you build a new economic pathway, which is a green economy and not the muddle that we are all experiencing at the moment, which is all fossil fuel based. So how do we lead to a green economic pathway which generates a lot of green livelihoods, and therefore green skills definitely need to be enhanced. Also, I would like that, we foster women-owned and women-managed mini grids in the rural areas. We were talking about women in leadership positions in the utilities or in the formal sector, but how about women-owned and women-managed mini grids in the rural areas? And last but not the least, a roundtable that the International Solar Alliance, the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, how we can open up green energy enterprises and small and medium enterprises and the necessary green skills to start and run such enterprises, including e-mobility, which is going to be another major sector. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Rimaji. Thank you very much. And I'm sure the spirit to continue to fight, adaptability and ability to take challenges, and of course, financial innovations is what is going to drive the momentum further. And we have noted down, and I'm sure the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, International Solar Alliance and SEWA will come together and join forces to lead to a green economic pathway as you have guided. Thank you very much. It was a privilege to have you here. With this, I will turn to our next speaker, Ms. Megan Fallon. The world is desperately seeking to build upon energy transition. We are looking at answers for a new social economic model that is climate neutral, resilient, sustainable, and inclusive. What efforts need to be made to ensure that inclusivity does not lose out from the array of wants at this critical time? What would be your recommendations to the government so that women become the job creators and engines of economic growth? The floor is yours, please.
Thank you so much, Megha, and I apologize to everybody, but I'm on a train trying to attend a Swiss government convening of carbon credit people. So on a train to save my carbon footprint from driving my car. So thank you. Always such an honor to be with my fellow warriors, Cecile, Suhela, and Rima. So wow, that's always a pleasure. I just thought before, I'd like to show a video actually today because it really exemplifies this. And I think we've heard a lot of talking, and sometimes it's nice to see in action and to actually hear from real women who have made this journey and who exemplify exactly what we're trying to show. But I did want to just really quickly touch on a few points that have been raised before. The first thing is I am seeing, not only in India, but globally, a huge widening and severity of the energy crisis in this pandemic period. Across multiple countries, we're seeing a lot more load sharing, a lot more energy cuts, provision of clean energy in rural areas, building infrastructure is now an imperative. Cecile and I have been having that conversation for many years, and I think this is an opportunity for India to export not only hardware, but technical mastery to the developing world and other global South countries. So I think this is a real opportunity. In terms of finance, our banking systems in India are dominated and focused on men, as has been said, but it really goes beyond that. It's a misalignment in appropriately being able to assess women's collateral calculation, for example, and overcoming the biases inherent in the mindset around risk assessment. So these are two things that I think actually MNRE could actually help us take the lead on and perhaps work on some type of a paper that actually sets out a criteria for assessing women's rural micro entrepreneurs, collateral calculation using trust-based credit coefficients, and really looking to redefine how we determine risk for women in terms of a lending situation. The other problem is that the banking system is not gathering either enough gender aggregated data to be able to actually make smart decisions about women. In fact, there's very little data aggregation in rural areas that actually helps us to know quite specifically what women need and how they need it. I think we need to stop we need to stop piloting things, right? And doing small, short-term kinds of projects. We need to move to an institutional mindset. Are we building institutional approaches and raising programmatic systemic collaboration to a level that builds momentum year on year, not just one time, not just one training class, not just one funding of a micro enterprise initiative, but really are we setting in place that long-term institutional thinking? And I really think we need to stop thinking that women just suddenly become entrepreneurs. They don't. They actually need to learn the skills, the critical thinking skills, whether they are literate or not literate, whether they've been formally educated or not. We need to accompany any technical mastery with entrepreneurial and agency building skill sets. Otherwise, we're not going to get the kind of entrepreneurial initiatives that we really need at scale. So with that, if I could very quickly share my screen, I hope I will make your day with a fun video that shows what happens when women are taught both technical mastery and that they need.
Sorry, Megan, I think the video is, I think we can't see the video being played. What I can see you there on the screen. Is it?
Sorry, I understand that you're speaking to me, Mega.
Yes, so maybe there is a network lag or something. The video is not visible. I can see you on the screen. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I don't know why it did that. I will share the link in the spot, but it does just exemplify the need to really catalyze both women's entrepreneurial mindset, their critical thinking skills, and a more general awareness of how renewable energy fits into a network and an interwoven approach that has to go beyond just the siloed look at renewable energy and to more holistic practice within communities. So it's really just to make that point, which I feel is really important. And I do think that we really do need to look at the service of renewable energy to communities as such an enabling factor that it goes beyond just an entrepreneurial opportunity, right? It's about enabling an entire community to move to a more economically viable new normal.
Thank you, Ms. Fallon. And I request you to please share the link in the chat box so that our the audience can see the video and be benefited from it. So thank you very much. And I completely agree with you when you say that our banking systems are focused on men, and there are biases for women, and biases are difficult to break. But I'm sure the officials at MNRE has taken note of your suggestions. And as DGISA had also mentioned right in the beginning, that we need to track the creditworthiness of women entrepreneurs as we move ahead. We need to move towards institutional mindset is the thought with which I move on to the next panelist. And taking a cue from what you said, perhaps comes out my next question to Ms. Cecil Martin-Phipps from the International Solar Alliance. Cecil, civil society, philanthropies, and funds are adorning gender lens while planning their contributions toward climate change organizations. You have been at the forefront for securing resources for skilling and training workforces in RE, especially solar globally. What are the key interventions that the International Solar Alliance is making or is planning to make in future to ensure that women all across the globe get to participate in renewable energy projects? The floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Mega. Well, first of all, I would like to say that it's an honor to participate to this session on women entrepreneurs in renewable energy. It's very, very inspiring to hear all my co-panelists and even before, the speakers before. What I wanted to say is that when I first began my career in the energy and sustainable development sector 15 years ago, very few of my colleagues were women. It seemed to be the norm at the time in the energy-related jobs. But now this pattern has started to change altogether, and in part thanks to the emergence of solar energy and the more holistic, democratized energy future they represent. If the energy transition must drive sustainable growth and development, it really needs to be inclusive in every sense, and women have to be part of it. Solar is bringing a major and positive disruption in that regard, because for the first time, the same technology is available to all, from few watts for any citizen, women or men altogether, to gigawatts for large companies and utilities. And the same potential is provided to everyone, everywhere. And that really opens up many questions, such as any building and infrastructure can now provide energy. Citizens are becoming prosumers. Poor but sun-rich countries can become energy providers to the world. And that really opens up the horizons here. Solar energy is really the perfect answer to the need for equity, inclusive development, and a better relationship with nature. It provides the most co-benefits in terms of comfort, well-being, gender balance, job creation, social acceptance, balance of payment also at the country level. In fact, a growing number of women are looking at the solar energy sector as a source of well-paid employment with strong opportunities for career advancement. Solar photovoltaic technology creates a high number of jobs due to the large workforce required for installation, sales, operations and maintenance. So there is a wide range of opportunities available for women. And that's something that has been already discussed before and presented by some and by Megan as well. In addition, many of the best regions for solar technologies, such as India or Africa, really particular needs for distribution and services related to solar energy products. And there is a broad range of employment opportunities in this sector, from entrepreneurship and business development to installation and maintenance, sales and distribution, of course, manufacturing, construction and operation, research and development, software development. I mean, you can go on like this. The ISA is precisely working in that direction by working with governments and with partners to identify measures to mainstream gender considerations in all solar energy access programs, and really highlights the role of women, not only as beneficiaries, as it was mentioned earlier as well, but also as active energy providers, prosumers, entrepreneurs, and leaders. The solar energy sector employs a large share of women compared to the conventional energy fields, but like in other fields of work, women still encounter numerous obstacles, from the lack of equal access to education, training, mentoring, professional networks and finance, to the glass ceiling in companies and institutions. And I really liked what Dr. Ghosh said earlier. Capacity building is a noun, building capacity is a verb. It's exactly true about training. These obstacles are real, but rather than opposing men and women, I would like to stress the importance of gender equity. Equity means recognizing that differences in ability mean that fairness often requires treating people differently so that they can achieve the same outcome. And our common goal here is really to achieve the SDGs by 2030, right? So gender equity is what should drive us forwards. Men like women are educators. Both my husband and I want to live a better world, and I'm sure that everyone in that panel are feeling the same. We want a cleaner planet for all our children. Men like women are producers and work the land, this land that we should protect by harvesting the renewable energy that surrounds us. So that's what I wanted to share here. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts on this topic. I will come again afterwards.
Thank you very much, Cecil, and thank you very much. And employment opportunities in solar are huge, as you said, and I'm sure the collaborations are going to be the game changers in coming time, as you rightly mentioned. And a platform like International Solar Alliance is exactly going to facilitate that. Thank you for joining us. It was a privilege to have you. With this, we move on to our next panelist. My next question is from Praveen Saxena ji. Sir, post-COVID-19 period is an opportunity for India, like all other nations, to promote sustainability across sectors. Green jobs and green local enterprise will play a crucial role in championing energy transition. Where do you see women in this opportunity? What innovative policy instruments can facilitate this change, and what initiatives have already been taken in this regard by Government of India? The floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, Megha, and I thank Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, Mr. Jagdale, to create this kind of atmosphere where we can discuss about women participation in various activities, more so in renewable energy. In fact, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy is fortunate to have programs which have always somehow focused on women, starting from 1982-83, when we had biogas programs and improved cook stove programs, which were women-centric. So the atmosphere in MNRE is anyway to favor the entire ecosystem from the gender point of view. But whatever may happen, we have seen that the participation of women is somewhere around 16, 17% in most of the programs and the jobs. which need to, in fact, renewable energy, yes, is said to have the maximum number somewhere around 30. But when I look at the data, what we somehow aggregate, it is still resting somewhere around 15, 16, 17%. If before answering your question, let me very quickly see where from the skilling lens these things are resting. So if I look at some of the numbers, this year, in fact, about 4 lakh people have been working in the renewable energy sector, entire renewable energy sector, with about 1.8 lakh people working in solar photovoltaics, about 60,000 people working in wind energy, and about 55 to 60,000 people working in the bioenergy sector, which includes start of biofuel and agro residue kind of a thing. These figures are expected to be about 6 times more in 2030, keeping in view the targets we have. And we are expecting that about 18.2, 18.3 lakh people would be working in the renewable energy sector, solar being the highest. And we are also expecting every year there will be new jobs of the order of 50,000, starting from 15,000 to somewhere around 2.5 lakh every year from now to 2030. So great opportunities, frankly speaking. COVID, this number suddenly became less due to COVID, and the jobs created last year were relatively much less than what we expect. But nevertheless, there are a lot of traction coming, and we have been talking to, in fact, the sector skill councils or the skill councils in the country are industry-led bodies, and we keep on talking to industry as to see what kind of skills are required, and definitely sort of advocate for equal gender equality. So as far as post-COVID is concerned, we are expecting that this shift, because the whatever we may say, the reliability factor with women is relatively higher than and industry feels that they can have more reliability on that. I would also touch another point at this point, that while it is difficult to control the higher level of jobs, whether they are going to male or female, and we cannot have any real control over that, but surely if we look at the rural market, we find that if we are able to inculcate entrepreneurship in the rural areas, and I have a very beautiful example where Skill Council directly implemented a project of President of India, Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, in 50 villages, where we started with the premises that the entire project would be delivered by women entrepreneurs. So we started with distribution of cooking, cooking stoves, more so induction cookers, and water purifiers to look at water quality, and then cooking, indoor cooking, and also at the solar lighting systems. So we started with 12 women who were ready to become entrepreneurs, and it became extremely successful. So what I want to say is, if we are able to center our programs around typically in rural areas around women, the reliability of distribution or the effective distribution and the way we want to implement the program becomes much higher than that. So our effort should be in that direction, that we start involving more women from the grassroots levels. All of us know it, but it is a matter of how do we really push this. As far as government policies are concerned, they are always there, and government wants that to happen, but it actually doesn't happen. That is also true. And probably what I personally feel that we as skill councils or the people working in the skilling of the manpower, I would like to say that about 22 to 25% minimum trainings or skillings should go towards women, and that would start making change. We are already seeing that happening. COVID has really moved us in such a way that why not to create skills and jobs at the grassroots level, involving various panchayats, districts, and that's how the government is actually moving in skills now, that the demand comes or the demand aggregation happens at the district level, where women becomes an important component. And I'm quite sure that if we start our activities more so like Seva did that for salt pan workers, if we institutionalize our programs in that direction, I'm sure we would be very, very successful in improving the percentage of participation of women in our entire area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thanks for the update and for the fresh numbers. I'm sure whatever impediment COVID has brought in will be mitigated with digital interventions and interventions at grassroots level, as you rightly mentioned. In rural areas, pilots like you did and what you mentioned, where women controlled everything, are going to incubate more of such kinds. And as Ms. Ferguson had mentioned early in the discussion, that women entrepreneurs have potential to acquire customers. So that is also an important thing that can be kept in mind. Holding that thought, with this, I will now turn to Ms. Suhaila Khan from UN Women. Suhaila, we know that UN Women has been making interventions with a clear focus on SDG 7 consistently in India and around the globe. I would like to invite you to share your experiences from renewable energy projects that UN Women has implemented in India. What were the challenges, and basis that, what would you like to recommend to the policymakers so that there can be a greater involvement of women in RE sector? The floor is yours, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Megha, and thank you for having UN Women at this very, very important and critical platform. My wishes to all the fellow panelists and the organizers of this very important consultation today. So I would have 3 examples to share, Megha. One is the project that we did together with the Madhya Pradesh Urja Vikas Nigam Limited. And you know what we were trying to do essentially through that project was address 2-3 parallel issues. One was really the infrastructural issues that the women Anganwadi workers were facing due to the lack of provision of providing rent towards providing electricity fee for their Anganwadi centers. There was no provision for this in their budget. And we also realized that a lot of Anganwadi centers were operating out, not in the panchayat buildings, but in separate homes and, and buildings and structures which are not connected to the electricity. In Madhya Pradesh, during hot season, the days become really hot, and it was not creating an amenable or conducive environment for the growth and learning of the children, but also creating issues for Anganwadi centers, because without access to electricity, they were not able to operate their mobile phones, charge them, or send up-to-date information on monitoring and evaluation parameters. So one of the ideas that we implemented together with Madhya Pradesh Urja Vikas Nigam Limited as part of a co-financing model. So a part of funding was provided by UN Women towards the capital support, but a part of funding was also made available through the subsidies that were available at Urja Vikas Nigam to operationalize this pilot, which was implemented in 63 Anganwadi centers of Madhya Pradesh. We consider it as a successful intervention because based on that intervention, the Department of Women and Child Development under its Poshan Abhiyan made this provision of solar powering all the Anganwadi centers that were not connected with the grid, and it made a budgetary provision into that. So, the second vision that we had towards this program was also converting these Anganwadi centers into safe spaces, which could also be utilized as productive spaces for women in the evening, because now they were connected with grid and there was a provision of electricity. The third thing which they did was, also providing the safety, security from the perspective of safety and security. What we realized that, these Anganwadi centers were in hamlets or in pockets which were very dark during night, and women used to travel, from around these hamlets. So putting a light or putting a bulb outside the Anganwadi centers also created that safe and secure environment when it was well lit. So women were able to extend their working hours, were able to do a lot of things that they were unable to do due to lack of safety and security issues. So that was one intervention which has a potential to be replicated in all the other estates with the support of all the existing subsidies. And MNRE, we are happy to share, the model with MNRE and work with them on replicating in other estates as well. Although we conceived it to be a larger model, just not limiting to lighting, we could not pursue our interventions, but the other interventions that were pipeline and that were recognized were also, including in these solar Anganwadi centers, solar powered Anganwadi centers, the solar water purification system, because we did realize that there was an issue of, water within the communities. What could it have done was also to generate potential employment for women. We were in conversation with the State Rural Livelihood Mission at that point of time, and could not pursue because of lack of resources of UN women. So these were some of the interventions that has potential to create employment opportunities for women in this sector. The second intervention which we did is on solar drying, and this is something which is a business model, an innovative business model that operates on a buyback modality. So the problem that we were trying to address were two. One was really when women farmers grow their perishable products, or for that matter, any farmer, when they grow their perishable products like tomatoes, etc., a lot of them got wasted, and you might have seen the pictures in newspaper of tomatoes thrown on the roads, right? Just because they don't have access to the cold storage facilities or infrastructure. And being perishable, these items won't be able to get the same return when they try to sell it in the market. So one of the interventions that we did was around providing the access to technology to rural women, which was solar drying technology, and it was innovated by one of the youngest startups of young engineers called S4S Technologies, and they had an award-winning technology, UN award-winning technology in solar drying. So we did a pilot again with women entrepreneurs, with rural women farmers, now entrepreneurs or agripreneurs as we call them, to enable them to dry their products, agricultural produce. If they do not have their agricultural produce, the organization also provides them, procure the turmeric and spices for them, give it provide it to them, and then take back the dried product as a buyback guaranteed opportunity. So what it does is that there is a guaranteed income to the woman, and the organization is able to get the dried products and sell with its own brands and marketing linkages that they have created with hotels, that they have created with other organizations that require dried products. Now, the second aspect to it was also, which was not intended, but the effect that we noticed was improved food and nutrition security at household, because, it was noticed that in a lot of the households, very poor households, when there is meager, ration or meager, ingredients, it's largely women who give up the food for male members, right? And once these dried tomatoes or vegetables were available within their households, they had access to this throughout the year, and we measured the increase in nutrition security of these women as well. But my third intervention, which is not directly related to this, but somewhat I think pick up from what Nava pointed out initially, the lack of that we need to mobilize impact investors in order to enable women entrepreneurs to be able to receive that much needed finance support. Now, UN Women, and together with UNDP and Niti Aayog's Women's Entrepreneurship Platform, we have developed something called Investor Consortium. And the idea is to invite the applications from the women entrepreneurs. This is sector agnostic as well as of now, but we can do the similar kind of intervention for renewable energy for entrepreneurs that are dealing in renewable energy, to invite them to submit their ideas and their business propositions to UN Women and UNDP. Then what we do is that we analyze those applications as per the requirement of the investors and their mandates, build their capacities on business skills, on pitching skills, and then organize one-on-one pitching sessions with the investors. So I think this is something we should be able to mobilize together with the support of the ministry, for this particular sector, and would be willing to support, provide support to operationalize this as well.
Thank you, Suhaila. Thank you very much. And I come from Madhya Pradesh, so I can understand what you're saying. I have lived this up. And a fascinating work. And by facilitating women, you touch upon the whole ecosystem, as you said, right from providing technology, education, clean water, employment, business models, and truly enabling exercise, I would say. But here, I would like to add that perhaps, more subnational entities have to proactively take up the assistance and expertise of the UN Women that UN Women is providing to make way to this very sensitive area. And as you have mentioned in the end, perhaps to ideate, innovate, and incubate is perhaps the call that we all have to take and put the fuel to. With that, I would like to thank all the panelists. And what I can understand from this discussion is clearly that women are an immense but underutilized economic resource, and that growth and recovery will be limited in the absence of gender-focused interventions. What we need is in-depth understanding of the ecosystem in which women have to operate. We also need insights into motivations, advocacy, constraints, and most importantly, the solutions to accelerate entrepreneurship for women in renewable energy. For instance, when access to finance impacts nearly every entrepreneur, the challenge becomes all the more daunting for women entrepreneurs. Further, we need to be alive to the fact that a different set of challenges is faced by those who want to scale up and those who are just starting. So lack of information, networking opportunities, and absence of tailored products hold them back. So segmentation of women entrepreneurs is a good starting point for this very powerful journey we are destined to take forward together. But with this, I would like to conclude this session, and I now request Joint Secretary, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, Shri Dinesh Jagdale, to please take the floor and guide us on the way forward. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Megha. Thank you all the panelists for such a wonderful discussion. There is a lot of takeaways for us. There is a lot of guidance that from the ministry's perspective that we are noted down, but we also need to really think on what else, what new can be done to actually engross more, have a dialogue more, and see that all the sections of the society are benefited out of the massive renewable energy program that the entire world is taking. So I think Secretary Aminari, informed us about the transformative and enabling policies in place, about what Aminari has been doing, and his observation on the economic empowerment that has had a positive effect on the social status of women is something that was really, everyone present here would agree with, and we would really take this forward. I thank Dr. Mathur, DG ISA, for sharing his observations that women has an advantage over men in leadership, entrepreneurship, as well as end-use consumption. And that I'm sure everyone agrees with his call for greater emphasis on areas like skill development, equitable financing, and user feedback. So that were wonderful thoughts that he shared with us. I would also like to thank Ms. Ferguson for very effectively summarizing on how equal participation of women in the workforce increases output as well as return on investment. An extremely wonderful thought to take forward. And we totally agree that women can help improve the reach of renewable energy. That's our main aim today, and make the energy transition more effective. So I'm pleased that the synergy between the discussions today, the panel 1 and the panel 2, and effectively moderated today the Government of India. So there is a synergy between the discussions and the Government of India's vision and the overall global trends. We all know that this decade is a decade of action, and everybody has to, every country is watching for sustainable development goals. By reinforcing and encouraging greater participation of women in RE and sustainable energy, I think we can move much faster toward attainment of these goals, and India will take every step to ensure that this happens. India has traditionally recognized the role of women in not just shaping the society, but also in its continuous evolution into a better one. It is in this sustained spirit of our culture that we expect women to lead the change needed for a sustainable future from the front. And I take back this history to almost 40 years ago, when the first woman engineer of this country, Dr. Annamani, who started the resource measurement program, and we really command her taking initiative, and that is her research areas is still at our National Institute of Wind Energy, and those books are still referred, and the entire wind energy program was initiated by Dr. Annamani. So there has been a lot of case studies which we value and respect. As our RE sector continues to grow at unprecedented speed, it will soon confront growing of shortages of well-trained and experienced individuals. And a lot of has been talked about skill development, a lot have been talked about how skill entrepreneurship related to women can be developed, and how their participation will increase the transition as we speak as of now. So this becomes a very important factor, and I thank the panelists for bringing out very effectively today. As also one subject which came out today, that there has only few areas where women have been focusing, and I think we need to really breach that, and there are several areas. And when we talk of several areas as specific to renewable energy, obviously it's not only the STEM, but all the sections of all the areas of education, entrepreneurship, and when we talk of specific core areas, I think women needs to come out and facilitate and participate more in such programs. So I welcome young women, graduates from the country, to be a part of our Surya Mitra, Vayu Mitra programs, and I'm sure Dr. Praveen Saxena will be very keen to have such welcome all these young women to participate in his programs. We recognize that women could be key enablers for India's ambitious target for renewable energy, in particular in the overall journey to build back better for our future generations. So fascinating discussions, fascinately moderated, and all the women and leaders joined today. Sincere thanks from Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, and would take your suggestions, we have noted your suggestions, and all will be reflected in our actions. We'll try to build on this consultative dialogue and take all your inputs, all your practical experiences, all the case studies that were demonstrated today. So it would be a thought-provoking end to this lively discussion. I thank all of you once again. Good night, Shubharatri from India. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.